Hey guys, my name's Devin. Welcome to our latest edition of CrossConnect. Today I'm joined by Abes, who's going to prove to us why God exists. Abes, can you do that for us today?
Yes, thank you, Devin, for setting up such a difficult task. I'm certain I'll be able to prove he exists to you because you already believe he does. So it's very easy to prove things to people who already believe the things you're trying to prove.
Definitely preaching to the choir there.
Yes, not sure how I'm going to go for people who are skeptical of the idea, to be honest, but we'll give it a go, and hopefully we'll be able to sort of start a bit of a conversation. Yeah. So this argument is called the Cosmological Argument. It's got three sort of little simple premises to it. I think I showed four there, but three little premises to it. And it's an argument that's been around for a very long time. It's not so much new, but it's in an amended or new form that William Lane Craig, a Christian philosopher, has sort of put it in. But he actually calls it the Kalam cosmological argument because of its origins in Arabic thinking. It goes along like this: whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, and therefore the universe has a cause. So the first point: whatever begins to exist has a cause. If something doesn't exist and then it starts to exist, then it must have a cause. Something's triggered its existence. The universe, as far as most would understand, didn't exist and then came into existence. So then the final point, therefore the universe must have a cause. That cause, therefore, needs to be outside the universe. The universe includes space, time, matter, energy, the physical world. So the cause, therefore, needs to be outside of that physical world, not within it. And so the cause, therefore, must be metaphysical. Perhaps it is. Then you would say it would be spiritual. It's uncaused, eternal. So that's where we would then come in and go, well, that uncaused causer is God. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. That cause is God. That's the sort of simple format of the cosmological argument.
I mean, it makes sense to me. It's kind of similar to, where do babies come from? When a baby appears, you think, okay, something must have happened for that baby to appear.
Yes.
And I mean, that sounds pretty simple, makes sense to me. But I mean, there are a lot of scientists as well that would argue against the existence of God. They would say that there is no God. So I'm sure there's ways that they push back against this. They can't all believe that. So in what ways would they kind of push back on these arguments that you just made?
Yeah, definitely. They would absolutely push back, and rightly so, because we want to be intellectually honest. Science is about discovering the truth, and so we don't want to just sort of accept a simplistic argument and go from there. The ways I think that people would push back, I think there's a simple format for how people push back, which is to say, well, if God made the universe, who made God? And that's fair enough in one sense, because you kind of think, well, is that really the answer? Is it really just that God made everything and he doesn't need to be made? The argument, if you look at the details of it and go through a bit more carefully, it does naturally respond to that response. It's kind of already addressed that response within the format of the argument. But I understand why people would still just naturally think of that, because that's kind of our natural sort of thought. But of course, that does lead us to a sort of an infinite regression, which is another problem that we would have facing that. The other ways, I guess, is that, again, there's been a tendency maybe for theists or for people who believe in God to put God forward in perhaps a very sort of weak way, or what we might call the God of the gaps, where if we don't know something, we just say, oh, it's because God did it, and don't look at it anymore, shut down the discussion. And that is, of course, frustrating and not right. And so science has been able to just continue to expand our insights into the universe and into our world, and it's just continued to reveal new information to us. And it's just amazing that what we can discover. And so to come through and offer a simplistic answer about the origins of the universe is perhaps not very satisfying, and I think for science, it's the question is, well, is it really the answer? Let's actually have a look at this and see if there's another answer. What they'd come back with, like Lawrence Krauss has written a book, I think it's called A Universe from Nothing, and many of those atheistic scientists would offer some very good scientific responses that are probably far beyond my intellectual capacity to understand. But in his book, he kind of gets to the end of it and sort of says that a universe can come from nothing, but that nothing might be different to what we think of as nothing. The theist would come through and go, oh, well, you've redefined nothing as something, and that's the sort of common response. But perhaps there's a legitimate reason why he's doing that in terms of quantum physics and what that is revealing to us about time and energy. If anything, we're still learning things, and so I think that's possibly one of the reasons why even Dawkins in interviews would be like, the origins of the universe is still something we're investigating. So it's still up for grabs, and I think that's where people have a legitimate sort of response, because science has historically delivered answers.
Is it fair to say that most modern scientists wouldn't kind of dispute that the universe had a beginning, and so it's more just kind of arguments about what caused that? So, there might be some that argue that the universe existed forever, but it seems like what Krauss is saying, what Dawkins is saying, that the universe seems to have some sort of beginning, but the arguments more seem to be around what was that? Is it a god? Is it something else, or can something come from nothing?
Yeah, I think that majority do agree that the universe has a beginning point, and that's the whole idea of the Big Bang theory. It's that there's this sort of enormous starting point explosion as the universe sort of expands outwards, and the expansion of the universe is an indication of that beginning point. So I think that most would agree with that. There has been theories put forward of an eternal universe to answer that response as well, and I'm sure there are still people that would go down that lines. I think, and other responses have been things like the multiverse theory of there being lots of different universes and the impact that has on the probability of a universe arising from nothing. So there's a couple of other responses like that, but typically most would agree the universe started, and what they're looking at is, well, how can it come from nothingness and or stagnant energy, whatever it is. That's really the sort of investigation that they're going under.
Yeah,
that's a good question. But if we think about it, at least from the Christian perspective, when we're not out to win an argument, we lose. If in some ways, if we just win the argument, then we lost because we're not out to simply defeat the opposition, but we want that. We believe that God loves that person and that they're valuable, and so we want to go beyond just philosophical arguments and conversation and recognize their weakness as well. That you're right, there are gaps in our knowledge. It's not the full picture of why I certainly choose to believe in God. I mean, arguments aside, there's a lot of other reasons, and they don't present themselves as scientific or philosophical arguments, but they've been compelling reasons for me to believe in God.
I think that's helpful to just say, look, even in all these arguments, we think they're good. There is good evidence for it, but even then, it has limited value, really, unless that God can actually be known, unless that God actually makes a difference in my life at all.
Yeah, that's right, and that's the cosmological argument in particular. As I mentioned, it come from Arab thinking and philosophy originally, with an influence from from Christianity as well. So you see these two sort of different groups that are coming together to think of these arguments, and it's been handed down and developed. So that's one thing, but that doesn't tell us, what God to believe in and whether that God has said anything. And that's where to make the jump to believing in Jesus and following him, or believing in a particular religion, that's a whole nother step, and has to involve more than simply a philosophical argument. But that's the bigger question as well. And for me, I think what's more compelling than has actually been investigating and reading about the historical figure of Jesus and how he lives and what sort of person he was like, and whether that has any meaning for me now. And that's been the more compelling thing for me, and why ultimately I sort of see myself as a follower of Jesus.
It makes sense to start with Jesus, who claims to be God, who can be known, and work out from there whether what he says is true, whether what he says makes sense, in line with those bigger questions of whether a God exists. But I guess in terms of where it's actually going to make a difference, only if that God can be known, if only he actually wants to communicate with us. And Jesus makes all those claims. And I mean, I think that's kind of why, I guess for us, that's kind of the more helpful starting point in many ways.
I think that's right. And therefore, for people who are interested in it, you kind of have to go down the pathway of, well, am I open to having some friendships, having some conversations with someone who thinks very differently to me, and just seeing where it goes and enjoying that, just enjoying that that discovery of have fun. And I hope that people who do believe in God and follow Jesus can relax as well, and not be defensive, and be empathetic, and try to think in a way that someone else might think, so that we can do that as well. And you don't have to go down the philosophical arguments first. They might not interest you, so just start learning about Jesus, and see whether he is interesting to you, and what you might learn about him.
I guess that's helpful, because, we often think that debates and discussions on these things, they have to be adversarial. It's me versus you. But why can't we kind of discover things together? We start with Jesus, work out what he says together. And I think that way it's done out of relationship rather than me versus you and trying to battle that out. Anyway, I just appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Devin. It was fun.